Good morning, good morning to you. Good morning, good morning to you. Good morning, good morning. Won't you share with a friend or two? Good morning, good morning to you. Good morning, good morning to you, and many more. Good morning, good morning, good morning, and welcome back to Daring Dialogues. I'm your host today, Shantae Charles. It is season 14, episode 3. I hope everybody is having a great and wonderful day out today. I hope that your day has gotten off to a great start. And if you are just with me for the first time for this season, I want to break down how it is that we share for Daring Dialogues. This is a streaming podcast. And every day, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday, we are going to be sharing something from a specific subject. So on Mondays, we have motivation. Tuesdays is our Teachable Tuesday, and we're on Facebook and YouTube on the page Black Table Talk, where we talk all things Black, Black people, Black politics, Black love, etc. On Wednesdays, which is today, we cover relationships, and we are reading from two fantastic books. So we're going to talk just about one today because we're doing a short show. And this book is Drama Free by Nedra Glover Tawwab. So on Wednesdays, spelled Winsday, we cover relationships. Thursdays, we look at theology and philosophy. So it's our Thinking Thursday, and we tend to focus on concepts of faith and belief. And this Thursday, we'll probably be talking a little bit about the recent movies that have come out, The Forge and The Deliverance. I'll be probably talking about why I'm not watching either one, but you can certainly share your perspective on those films if you have seen them. We're also going to talk a little bit about forgiveness on Thursday and the fact that the concepts of forgiveness are things that we need to look at and review and revamp. And then we're going to close out the week with Friday. Usually on Friday, we cover anything from health to wealth. So that is our lineup for typically how we set up our segments in our shows. Again, I will be on YouTube for this season, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. So you will see us here 5 days a week, plus our Sunday dialogue that we host on Sundays at 2:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So if you're like what you hear here, you can always come back and join us Sunday for our faith segment. Today, again, we are looking at the book Drama Free by Nedra Glover Tawwab, a guide to managing unhealthy family relationships. And we are in chapter 7. Chapter 7 is entitled Thriving versus Surviving. And good morning to each of you who are coming in and taking time to view the broadcast. I'm going to read aloud and share with you the first section of this chapter, Thriving versus Surviving. What does that mean? And then we're going to look at cycle breakers. What is a cycle breaker and what does it mean to break a cycle? My attention span is short, Whitney told me. At 32 years old, she wanted to change her patterns. Whenever she started dating someone, the romance moved fast. She would often move in with a new girlfriend within 3 months of dating, but by the end of the first year, she would be bored with the relationship and already seeing other people. In her heart, she wanted to find the one, but through her actions, she was clearly avoiding long term commitment. Without fail, after 6 months of dating, her partners would start to get serious about planning further, while Whitney slowly eased her way out of the relationship. Yet she wouldn't be direct with her partners about her intentions. This made for explosive and dramatic endings. And again, my name is Shantae Charles. While Whitney was growing up, her parents fought loudly and often. When she was 16 years old, they finally divorced, and to this day, they hate each other. Their on again, off again pattern didn't show Whitney how to sustain a healthy partnership. Even though she hated the chaos in her parents' relationship, she was now creating her own version of chaos. Then Whitney met Sabrina, who called her out on her BS and challenged her in ways that her previous partners had not. Sabrina insisted on taking things slow, but as Whitney noticed new parts of herself emerging in the relationship, she felt scared and vulnerable. Still, she wanted to make the relationship work. She knew she had to rely on role models other than her parents. Her mother often suggested that Whitney was, quote, like her father, a reference that Whitney hated. But in some ways, it was true. She knew she had to learn some new skills because the old ones of lying, cheating, and being passive aggressive weren't effective. Whitney decided to start therapy because she knew she needed support to stick to the changes she was making. For years, she blamed her relationship issues on her partners, but in therapy, she began to acknowledge how she contributed to some of the problems. She came to understand that she was mimicking unhealthy dynamics, so she worked on unlearning dysfunctional patterns and learning how to be in a healthy romantic relationship. Things can be different from what you've always done and what you've always experienced in your family. Thriving versus surviving. As a plant mom, I notice when my plants are thriving, flourishing, abundant, exceeding expectations, and when they're just surviving, languishing, getting by, and existing. When people grow up in dysfunction, they might succumb to the dysfunction. They might survive or they might thrive. In the previous chapter, we discussed how and why people succumb to dysfunction and the challenges associated with changing. We often say that people survive a dysfunctional family, but we rarely acknowledge that people can thrive despite having a dysfunctional family. Thriving suggests that yes, the environment was impactful, but our personality, determination, and essence superseded our conditions. We can never say who we would have been if we've grown up in a different environment. But some people have powerfully defied the odds created by their circumstances. Now, let me ask you today, have you defied the odds created by your circumstances? I know for me, I can definitely say I've definitely defied plenty of odds that were created by my circumstances. I did not grow up in a wealthy family. I don't even think I grew up in a poor family. I grew up below the poverty standard. Um, and so I know just by virtue of that, by virtue of the circumstances I was born into, by virtue of the fact that I was not born um, per se into the traditional family structure, a whole lot of factors, a whole lot of statistics were compiled and set up before me to say this is going to be your outcome and this is where you're going to wind up based on statistics. And I remember as a young person saying within myself, I will not be a statistic. That was something that I said to myself. And when I meant that, I was definitely talking about the negative statistics that were being constructed for me based on where I had been born and to who I had been born. And so, again, some people have powerfully defied the odds created by their circumstances. You survive when you don't repeat the cycle, but you thrive when you start creating a new legacy and a new trajectory for your life. Conscious awareness and effort are what separate someone who thrives from someone who survives. You can consciously create a different life, and those who do are known as cycle breakers. You thrive when you create a new legacy and trajectory. And I like what one young lady said earlier this week. She said, I'm not just interested in being a cycle breaker, I'm interested in being a cycle creator. I'm interested in creating a new narrative and a new legacy that someone else can follow behind me. So the author here defines cycle breaker. She says a cycle breaker is a person who intentionally breaks the pattern of family dysfunction. When you're the first, you often receive more pushback from other family members because you're challenging the family norms. You're challenging what's always been. You're challenging the narrative of your family. Sometimes you're challenging the character of your family or what your family might be known for, especially um, if you grew up where I grew up, where initially the family I was a part of was known for being very um, disruptive, very chaotic, very like Bebe's kids, causing and wreaking havoc within the community, getting into community fights with whole families. So if that is the persona that you're breaking out of, in my case, you have to begin to push back against the narrative of whatever your family's character or family makeup is. And the question is, are you ready to do that? Do you even want to do that? Do you have the willpower to do that? It isn't easy being the first because you have to teach yourself a lot of what you need to know in order to succeed. A lot of times when you are trying to break a cycle, I had to tell myself, going back and looking back, I forgive myself for what I did not know. You don't know what you don't know. And sometimes we're asking people to break cycles and they don't have the tools or they don't have the knowledge or they don't have the insight on what they need to do in order to break that cycle. And so I try to um, respond to people and I try to have conversations with people out of the lens of empathy, knowing what it took to get myself to a place of cycle breaking. Again, I needed help. I didn't always have the help. I didn't always have someone coming along and saying, here's the way out, here's the door, here's the window, here's the structure. But now that I'm on the other side, right, through my coaching practice, through my education practice, I'm able to help other people to come out on the other side. So you have to teach yourself a lot of what you need to know in order to succeed. You learn how to be a different person with a few guides and sometimes no family support. Cycle breakers are willing to unlearn what wasn't helpful and eager to step outside the box to create a life that works best for them. And here's the thing, you have to be unapologetic about the life you want to create that works for you, that may not work for someone else, that may not work for your family members because they're used to you being in a certain position or a certain box and you've moved out of that box and that disrupts their life because you're no longer in the box that you've been in. But you have to be unapologetic about the life that you want to create, a life that works best for you. If you came out of a chaotic family environment and the life that you're trying to create is one of peace and tranquility, then that means there's a lot of things that will have to change in your life. There might be interactions that have to change. There might be places that you have to cross off your list and say, I'm not going to be in those spaces because I'm trying to create a new life for myself. So, here are some things that might be challenging for cycle breakers. One, consistently making decisions in your best interest. It is okay, say this to yourself, it is okay for me to make decisions that are in my best interest. It is okay. Give yourself permission to do that. Managing survivor's guilt or remorse. Now, when I was growing up, I don't remember this term being used, but it's certainly very, very true for me that sometimes I look back at the people who didn't make it out of my community, the people who didn't make it out of my neighborhood. Or I actually have a poem based on one of those people. His name was Willie Henry, and Willie Henry was selling drugs to support himself and his siblings because his mother had pretty much abandoned him and his siblings. And there was a point where Willie Henry, someone had stolen his package, and Willie Henry didn't have the money for that package. And I remember in our community, everybody being on pins and needles because they had given him a deadline and said, if you don't have our money by this time, we're going to unalive you. And everybody in the community had heard this and knew what was could happen, and it did happen. And it was a huge blow to our community. Nobody went to school that day. Nobody went to school that day. And he was gunned down in front of his home. Now, I don't know because I was young at the time. I don't know what happened to his siblings after that. But we know that his mother was not in the picture, and he was the one that was taking care of his younger siblings. And so, yes, that had a profound effect upon me as a young person. Now, because of where I lived, Willie Henry's body lay out in the streets. People talk about Mike Brown and how his body lay out in the street for 4 hours. Willie Henry's body laid out in the street all day because of where I lived and the fact that people didn't care about us. People didn't care about our community. We were like the last community that the coroner would come through at the end of the day. So they let his body lay out there all day in the street, uncovered, and people could walk by and look at his body. So when we talk about managing survivor's guilt or managing remorse, that incident marked my life in a way that is still sometimes informing what I know about the ghetto, what I know about what happens when you strip resources from a community and what happens when people are in a community and they're trying to survive. So Willie Henry, I will forever say his name. I've been saying his name before the hashtag. I will forever say his name as a reminder to myself of my own story, as a reminder to myself that that was a number of my peers that didn't make it out of where I lived. But I'm here. And so a part of being a cycle breaker is remembering, but not letting your remorse take you to a place where you are inactive. If you have survivor's guilt, if you have remorse, think about how that remorse can move you into a place of action. Another thing that might be challenging for cycle breakers, dealing with imposter syndrome. Now, imposter syndrome, by the way, was initially something that was research and studies simply done, I believe, on middle class white women. And so I don't use the term imposter syndrome because I know who I am. Now, when people try to make you feel like you aren't who you are, I don't call that imposter syndrome. That's something else. I call that racial intimidation oftentimes, but I don't call it imposter syndrome. Establishing a healthy support system. As a cycle breaker, you will have to establish a healthy support system, and what that looks like for everyone is going to be different. Another challenge, being transparent about your story because of fear of judgment. Well, guess what? People have been judging me all my life. People have been judging me since I was in the womb. Before I even got here, there was lots of judgments about me, about how I came into the world, about whether or not I was going to come into the world. There was judgment about what I should be named. There were discussions. And so, fear of judgment, I don't know that I have that. I know that some people do. But as long as I can remember, there's always been some judgment about my existence in the earth. And so I know that for me, that comes with the territory of who I am. Finding a community among people with similar experiences. Now, again, this may take some transparency from you. This may take you opening up. This may take you being willing to be vulnerable. And I know that even in your vulnerability, sometimes people take your transparency and they try to weaponize your transparency. We're seeing a lot of that happen with the political wranglings that are happening right now. Remembering to take care of yourself. Learn, learning to be among people who come from traditional backgrounds. Learning to adapt to environments with which they have no experience. Anybody ever felt like you have just been thrown into an environment and you feel like, oh my God, I can't find my feet. I can't, I feel like I'm just waiting and trying to figure things out. You can experience that, having to adapt to environments with which you have no experience, but patiently gaining the experience and gaining the skills. And then the other challenge, setting limitations on how often and in what ways you can help others. Sometimes you have to put on your own mask before you can give help to others. So if it takes you a while to go through the process of putting on your own mask, don't feel pressured to offer help to other people when you yourself are still in the needing help process. Find ways in which you can offer help. But if you feel overwhelmed or you feel like I'm going too fast, this is taking too much energy out of me, this is sapping my strength, it is okay to step back and tell that person, listen, I'm trying to put on my own oxygen mask right now. I need some time. I need a moment because if I can't help myself, I am going to be no good to you in the future. Sometimes deciding to change yourself means you must distance yourself from people who haven't changed or who uphold unhealthy behaviors. It can be challenging to leave loved ones behind when they don't change along with you. It may make you an outsider in your family. The changes you make in your personal life can also affect the way the people in your life see themselves. Cycle breakers care about their family relationships and they know that some of the relationships will change as the cycle breaker begins to thrive. If you're the cycle breaker in your family, others may find it hard to accept the changes because they knew you before you knew yourself. They may have a hard time letting go of who they think that you are. You are becoming more of yourself, and that can be hard for people who want to see you only one way, the way that works for them. So, as we close out today, I want you to think about cycle breaking. Ask yourself the question, am I a cycle breaker? Am I in the process of breaking cycles in my life? Where am I in that process? Am I still getting my footing? Am I starting on a new journey? Is this a new thing for me or have I been in this a while? Have I been breaking cycles in my family and I just didn't realize that it was me, that I am the cycle breaker? Are you coming into that recognition and that acknowledgement right now? I want to close by saying this. You have the power, you have the strength to break the cycles in your life. It's going to be by the power that's been invested in you. By virtue of the fact that you have made it into this plane of existence, there is power that is seated on the inside of you. Your job and your responsibility is to bring that powerful part of you out into the open. I hope that you do that. I hope that you work on that. And I encourage you to keep going and to be that cycle breaker. Do it for yourself, do it for your future. This has been another episode of Daring Dialogues, and I've been your host today, Shantae Charles. I want to thank you for your time and attention. If you're interested in picking up the book that we're reading from on Wednesdays, the book is called Drama Free by Nedra Glover Tawwab, and the other book is called Set Boundaries, Find Peace, a guide to reclaiming yourself by Nedra Glover Tawwab. All right. These are the two books that we'll be reading and discussing on Wednesday. So if you're joining us weekly, pick up these two books and read along with us. Remember, light is the most daring opposition to darkness. So continue to go out and be light. Take care, be well, and most importantly, be light.